Welcome everybody to the Utilities and Roading Committee meeting at the Waimakariri District Council on Tuesday the 21st of July. I'd just like to call for apologies, please. No apologies? No, thank you. Right, conflict of interest. Anybody got any conflict of interests? No. No. We'll now do the confirmation of the minutes. It's on page 9 to 16. That's for the minutes on Tuesday the 19th of May. Would someone like to move that these minutes be a true and correct record? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Williams and Councillor Blakey. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Now, are there anything that you wish to, matters arising from the minutes? Okay, now, we've got no deputations or presentations to do, and so we'll move on to 5.1, which is page 17 to 424, and this is Colin. Good afternoon, Colin.
Good afternoon.
And hello, and Kelly as well.
Cool. So this report is on the submission of 3 water safety plans. One is a resubmission of a plan that has been submitted before but wasn't approved twice, so it's the 3rd submission for the Waikuku Beach water safety plan. One is a 5-year renewal of a water safety plan, so all water safety plans need to be renewed at least every 5 years, so that's for the Cust water supply. And the other one is due to an upgrade on the scheme, which is the Garimere water supply. So if the scheme significantly changes within the 5-year period, you need to update the water safety plan to reflect the changes in the supply. So as we've noted at previous meetings, it's becoming increasingly challenging to get water safety plans accepted to the point where all water suppliers have really struggled to get them accepted in the last about 6 to 12 months. So in order to try to overcome this, we are putting a lot more work into gathering evidence on each of our suppliers to demonstrate safety. Some of the examples of improvements we've made on the Waikuku Beach plan since the last submission is we've done a lot more work on the leak detection analysis on that scheme. So carried out active leak detection across the whole scheme and included evidence to demonstrate that the lack of leaks on the scheme in that case. And we've also done a lot of work with our network planning team on analysing burst history analysis of pipes, which has fed into condition assessment data. So that was another area where we'd been asked for more evidence, was on how can we justify the conclusion that the pipes are in good condition. So we've put a lot of work into looking at past performance of pipes to justify the condition scores we've given them. And also at the last council meeting, we got the hygiene code of practice adopted, which was addressing another area of concern where they had asked for more evidence of practices that are undertaken when carrying out work on the water supplies to give assessors more confidence that it's done safely and hygienically. So after gathering all the evidence on each of the schemes, we go through a risk assessment process, which is we take into account all the data we've collected and we assess the risks both as though we had no preventative measures in place, and then we list what preventative measures we have and then reassess the risks, taking those into account. And then there's criteria given to us that that tells us how to define whether a risk is acceptable or unacceptable. So on Waikuku Beach, we concluded that there were no unacceptable risks for that supply. For Cust, we had one unacceptable risk, which was around the condition of the reservoirs, but we have an improvement project to address that identified as well, which is the renewal of the headworks. And on the Garimere supply, we had no unacceptable risks, but we did have there were no unacceptable risks in normal operation, but there was an improvement project identified in terms of its resilience and redundancy regarding the need for a second well because this is the only scheme that doesn't have any backup well, with the exception of Points Road, but at Points Road the plan is to change that as well. So from a resilience and redundancy point of view, that wasn't seen as, it was seen that we needed an improvement, but we still concluded that overall in normal operation there are no unacceptable risks. So obviously that's our assessment, and we submit that to the assessors, and then they decide whether or not they agree with us, and that's the most challenging part of it. But I think we have put a lot of work in these cases to come to those conclusions. So the only other point to note is that there's a couple more upcoming submissions. So the Ahoka Water Safety Plan is due for a 5-year renewal in October of this year, and Woodend Pegasus was assessed and not approved in March of this year, so we need to resubmit that as well. So I'm happy to take any questions on any of those plans.
Oopsie. Oh, it's gone. The question is, this, it's a very detailed report you've got. Is this required moving forward for an audit?
Yes, we think it is. The water safety plans have always been quite comprehensive. I think we learnt with Waikuku Beach that what we'd provided wasn't deemed to be enough. So yes, we do think that we need to go to this level to try to satisfy the assessors, and we've looked at other suppliers' water safety plans that haven't been approved, like Christchurch City Council, for example, and they're very thorough plans as well. So it does seem to be the norm now to go to this extent.
Councillor Stewart.
Madam Chair, just a question. I'm unsure whether, because it's referred to, I think, later in the agenda, about the leakage from these schemes. Is that part of the plan that you're putting for approval?
Yes, in each plan, the leakage is one of the factors that we assess.
Okay. Thank you. So last time we had a report on leakage for Waikuku, which was back in 2017. It was over the, sorry? Yes, I'm getting to it. Last time we had a report in 2017, the leakage from Waikuku was over the mandatory level of goal of 22%. In fact, it was 27%. What is it now?
I think it's at about 17%. So we have appended an assessment to our water safety plan, and when we first assessed it doing night flow monitoring, it was that figure you said, about 27%, and then when we did the detailed analysis, the contractor who did that work identified a few issues. Most of them were actually private leaks, and the most substantial ones seemed to be a cistern at urinals in the campground, which actually have a very high flow, and they were just flowing continuously, so it wasn't an issue with the public system. But when we alerted the campground to that, and I think during lockdown, they just said, well, we'll just turn it off until we get it fixed, because no one's using it anyway. And that seemed to coincide with the night flows dropping quite significantly. So it showed a couple of things, partly that on small schemes, a very small thing when you don't have much night flow anyway, can be quite significant and can change the leakage on the scheme by about 10% just by having a little thing change, unless there are other things changing in the meantime as well that we didn't know about. But yeah, and there was a couple of other leaks that were found that we fixed, but they were considered to be pretty minor, so I don't know if we couldn't see a difference from the day before we fixed it to the day after. And the urinal cistern seemed to be the thing that made the bigger difference that we could tell. And we also, there were some other properties where it was noted that they either had private leaks, or they might have been using water when no one was home, like had a washing machine going. So we've written those people letters to say that you may or may not have a leak, but please investigate these things. And some of them have come back to us and said they've checked their properties as well. So often when you assess leakage by night flow, you're making assumptions about the amount of genuine use at night, but if there's private leaks above that sort of lower threshold, you can end up overestimating leakage because you assume genuine use is leaks when it may not be.
Okay. And you probably found the Summerhill back in the days of 2017, it had a 91% leakage. I hope that was, 91% leakage rate. So when that comes up for renewal, I expect that we need to tackle that.
Yep,
That's a question.
I can talk more about leak.
Anyone else? Yes, Councillor Redmond.
Thanks, Colin. I just wondered, what's the hold-up with the Woodend Pegasus water safety plan? It'll have a bigger population than Waikuku, Cust or Garrymere, I would have thought.
I guess initially we were, when we submitted Waikuku Beach at the end of 2019 and also Woodend Pegasus around that time, we were expecting to see an approved Christchurch City Council plan in the meantime, which would help give some kind of precedent for what an approved plan looks like, and we never saw that. Like that hasn't eventuated yet, so I guess we were partly waiting because we were expecting that to happen, and then when it hasn't happened, we've just focused on getting Waikuku Beach back at first because we got a letter requesting us to do that, and then also the other two came up for renewal in the meantime, so there was no particular hold up. It's just more just waiting for some kind of precedent, because it does feel like to just keep submitting plans over and over again and keep having them fail until a precedent is decided upon can be a waste of resources. So it would be useful to get an approved plan and then use that as the basis for the next plan. But so, now that it's looking like that's not going to be the position we're in, we're just going to have to do our best and submit it back anyway.
Are there any rights of appeal when your plan is turned down? Is there someone you can appeal to higher up?
You can formally lodge a disagreement with the decision. We haven't opted to do that. We've just tried to address the points they've raised, but I guess ultimately that's where it could get to with a water supplier. I think we prefer to try to work with them if we can.
Yeah, just further to that, we are also working with other councils nationally. We're not aware of any water safety plans being approved across New Zealand. That includes 3 from Wellington Water and 8 from Watercare that have not been approved yet. Water New Zealand have recently released a questionnaire to all councils trying to gain information about their status of their water supply plans, and their intention is to write a letter to the Ministry of Health actually asking for some effectively some clear direction in terms of where this is heading, because it's not acceptable to actually be in the position we are for Woodend Pegasus with water safety plans being approved, and even though we get an adequacy report, effectively they're being rejected. So at a national level, there is some pressure being put on the Ministry of Health to actually give a clear direction, whether that actually be some type of temporary approval or whether it's actually speeding up the process. The reason for the temporary approval is that there is a perception that currently drinking water assessors are waiting for the new regulator to come into full effect to then approve water safety plans. But if that's the case, we need to have some kind of interim type measure, because currently Waikuku Beach and Woodend Pegasus are expired water safety plans.
What are the consequences of that, operating under expired plans?
It's a question that we have informally asked our drinking water assessors. What is the best approach we should be taking? Should we be operating under the previously approved but now expired water safety plan? Or should we actually be operating under the new updated water safety plan that's not yet approved? So we have had an unofficial response back regarding that. Effectively, some of the questions that Water New Zealand has put together are along those lines in terms of has anybody nationally got approval to say, okay, well, you haven't got an approved water safety plan, but here's documentation that we're not going to take any enforcement action as a result of not having an approved plan. So we have informally asked questions of our drinking water assessors regarding that, and we don't expect them to impose anything on us. The strongest steer that we've actually had was the letter that we got from the Canterbury District Health Board regarding the status of the Waikuku Beach water supply, asking for an update on it and when it would be submitted. And that's where we gave the undertaking that we would resubmit it by the 29th of July, hence this water safety plan coming through. We haven't yet had a letter for Woodend Pegasus, but we are expecting we will get one.
Do you have a question? Yes, right.
The leakage ILI range bans A, B, C, D. If you've got a 17% leakage like we talked about, where does that fit under A, B, C, D, that sort of percentage?
Yeah, it's not a direct correlation because the reason that engineers in particular don't like percentages is because you can get your percentage down by opening up all your fire hydrants on the scheme. So it doesn't mean the pipework's in better or worse condition. It's just a ratio of, night flow to peak, or to the average flow. So the infrastructure leakage index is intended to be a measure of the actual condition of the pipework. So it takes into account the pressure that you're operating at, the length of mains, the number of connections on the mains, and then looks at what your minimum flow is, but taking all those into account. So, and it doesn't matter how much you use on peak days or not, it's just assessing for this amount of pipe work and this pressure, how much is it leaking, and is that a reasonable amount for that amount of pipe work. And so for Waikuku Beach, the 17% equates to a B. When it was at 27%, it was a C. But it's, if it was at a different pressure or a different length of pipe, it wouldn't necessarily, they don't always line up for different schemes.
No, right. Right. Someone like to second? Thank you. Councillor Williams and
Yeah,
Councillor
I'd just
Leakage.
like to thank for a comprehensive report. Well done again. Thank you.
Thank you. Just like to say, I'm very impressed with this report. It's very well done. I've actually have mentioned it to your boss here just to say how well it's been presented. So congratulations. Anyone else would like to say anything? No, thank you. Right, well I'll move it then. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. And thank you very much. Right, we're going to move on then on to page 425 to 437. This is the proposed changes to the Three Waters level of service. So once again, Colin and Kelly, and have we got Gavin? Or not? No.
No,
Right.
but that's fine. We're
Okay.
well briefed on the wastewater stuff.
Right.
So the purpose of this report is to update the Utilities and Roading Committee into the level of service review that's been completed, and also to request the Utilities and Roading recommendation to Council to include these updated measures into the draft long-term plan. Just to explain the different measures, which are probably familiar, the mandatory measures are those that are set by the DIA, so they set what we have to measure, but we can opt what our target is. So that's what we've been revising, is if we found a reason to revise the target. And then there's the elective performance measures, and these are ones that we set and we report on at each scheme within the activity management plans. The measures have generally been modified either for clarity, accuracy or ease of reporting rather than to actually make a meaningful change to the service that someone would notice that they're receiving. And we also took the philosophy of I wanted to make sure we only had performance measures that if we didn't meet them we would intend to do something about it, rather than in the past there were some examples of a performance measure where we said, well, we don't meet this measure but it doesn't really matter for these reasons. So I think it was more I think the process should be you have a performance measure, and then if you don't meet it you introduce a project to make sure you do meet it, or if you don't agree with the fact that you should meet it then you should change the performance measure. So the example of that type of change was aesthetic compliance of all water supplies. So aesthetic compliance is not a health factor, and one of the things that comes under aesthetic compliance is pH, and the Waikaku Beach scheme is one example where pH can be about 6.9, which is less than 7, but an assessment had been done in the past to say essentially that has no consequence on the safety of the water. So we've never had an intention to address that. So we shouldn't continually fail on the performance measure for that. So that's that's just one example of the logic we went through with this process, and the other ones are generally more along the lines of just making the way that we report it, trying to make that easier to understand and meaningful. So I won't talk through the individual measures because there's quite a lot of tweaks that we've done, but we're happy to answer questions on specific ones that people may have picked up on.
Any questions? Yes, Councillor Stewart.
On leakage again, I see that you want to include the less than 22% across the whole network. Back in 2007, we had 10 of our 16 schemes fail to comply with that 22%, with Rangiora, the worst of the urban, leaking 25%. Can you just update on what is the proportion of schemes that still fail to meet the 22%?
I don't know the number of schemes in my head. I know that when we last looked at it, it was about 26%, but I think the way that we can make quite good improvements on that is not on spending lots of money on fixing pipes and things like that, but actually better understanding night use on restricted schemes in particular, because with leakage, either you can meter every single property and do a total flow balance, and we don't have universal measuring, so that would be a huge cost commitment to do that, or you can look at your night flows, and there's guidance set out on how you should take your minimum flow at night, what a portion of that is genuine night use, and then the rest must be leakage. So that tends to work reasonably well on on-demand schemes, although, you know, as we talked about before, on a scheme like Waikaku Beach that's quite small, one or two little private issues can be quite sensitive to that. But on restricted schemes, it's more challenging, where restrictors are designed that they're supposed to open at night even when people aren't using water to keep filling the tanks. So there's no guidance or published or that we can find from anyone else on how to use the night flow method for restricted schemes, but also there's no real alternative. You know, the alternative of flow metering and doing a complete water balance is also very expensive. So we're just starting some work with our new water engineer to look at having loggers on meters that we could move around, build up a database of actual genuine night use on restricted schemes, and that would likely just give us data to justify increasing the amount of assumed genuine night use based on actual data we've collected, and that would in turn reduce the leakage on all those schemes. So I think through actually understanding our water use a lot better, the leakage will come down without actually fixing a single leak. It's just we need to find a way to understand water use a lot better than what we currently do to more accurately report on it. So we're until we've completed that work, in the meantime, we're kind of a little bit, we know we're over-reporting, but we don't yet have the data to justify a new methodology until we can go through that work ourselves. Kelly's just shown me the table of schemes that are over or under 22%. So it's basically all our fully restricted schemes, Mandeville, Fernside, Summerhill, West Eden, Oxford 1 and 2 are all above 22%.
So what's the highest? And what's the date of this evaluation?
That was over the winter of it was over 2018-19 financial year, because we assessed it on that period, so that was over 2018-19, and the range across the district was from about 8% on Pegasus to about 60-ish% on some of the restricted schemes. But again, that we really just need to understand night use better, because we've just today we've been looking at data on the Fernside scheme, because it is sort of a case study of a restricted scheme where there's a low enough number of connections. We could put meters on most of them and look at that data, so it won't be cost effective to do that on the bigger schemes, but we just thought to kind of test the theory on the overestimating, and at our first cut it went from about 58% to about 30% leakage. So we halved it without fixing a leak, just by getting a bit better data. So I think we just need to find a cost-effective way to get good data on the others.
And of the urban schemes, Raiora was over the desired leakage rate back
Yep.
in 2017.
Yep.
Has that changed, or did you say 26%?
It's very similar, 26%. So
Yeah, well, it's actually, gone up, but
Yep.
I mean, it sounds like there's a bit of leeway in your stats.
Yeah.
And error.
Yeah, there definitely is a bit of a margin for error where you don't do a full flow balance. So, but we can also, there might be other ways we can address that as well. Like we've been talking today also about pressure management. So we could, for example, lower the pressure when demand is low and increase it when it's high, and that wouldn't help with our ILI, because the ILI just looks at, for a given pressure, how much is it leaking, and if you the equation knows if you lower pressure you should get less leakage, but it helps with the percentage. So it won't help prove our pipes in better or worse condition than what it is for water safety plans and things, but it will help in terms of that percentage of water lost, which is also important to show that we're not wasting water.
Are you going to report on leakage across the schemes at some point as a separate
Yep.
exercise?
Yep, for quite a few months I've had a report about 3/4 written, and it triggered an update of the water conservation strategy, which became a much bigger task than I intended, because it I think my plan is to get it to the September UNR meeting.
Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Williams.
You might be doing this already, but
Yeah.
Is it worthwhile sending letters to schools and any places that got urinals to have them checked?
Yep, that's a good, we have been starting to think about that, but not actually getting it in place yet. But I think education, so we do community education on water use, but I think we could probably do it in a slightly more targeted way for particular things like that. Like we did on that topic, we've got about 114 properties that are metered that we do actively read as a kind of representative sample, and one of those was, quite a few of those were schools, and one of those schools we noticed particularly high use, and again it was urinals at that school, and we talked to the school and they were in the process of upgrading their, doing an upgrade at the school anyway, and addressed that. So we have at one school addressed it, but we have looked at data at other schools which seems a lot more reasonable. But yeah, I think there's more work we could do in terms of public education and thinking how we target those messages.
And the second question is, have we checked our own supplies of urinals, of public toilets around? worth doing. You know, we can't be in a glass house, it's all.
Yep. Yes, I haven't been involved in that, and we should. I don't go to lots of our public toilets, but I don't usually see urinals in them. But I'm sure we have some urinals in the district, so yeah, we definitely should make sure our buildings aren't wasting water as well.
Thank you. My question is, please, with the restricted supplies, do you take into account stock, drinking water through the evening, and people watering their gardens and things like that at night time, such like? Is that all taken into your account for your percentage?
It's basically the methodology that's set out in the water loss guidelines is very basic. It's just to look at the minimum flow at night in winter and assume a low level of genuine use, so it doesn't think about all those different things that you might find on a restricted scheme and not on others. It should take into account people who irrigate their gardens at night, but again, it's just an average figure that was come up with in 2010 when the guidelines were published. So, I don't know, the person who came up with the guidelines, how much research they did into that. We're just using it as the document in New Zealand that's accepted as the way to do it, but gathering our own data, I think, will definitely help with that.
Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Colin. I'm always nervous of performance measures that say 100%. So I just wanted to query the ones that you've amended. I did like the wording, but I just wanted to query the one about investigating flooding in different areas. You've got that as 100%. If there are areas that we are aware that we cannot solve, that are too difficult to solve or have been investigated before, how will you cover it under that performance measure?
I think the key to that is the wording that has been added into the performance measure itself, where we talk about that 100% are investigated and where justified, measures implemented to improve the situation. So what we're actually committing to with 100% is that 100% of them will be investigated, but it's only where it's justified that we will actually go and do measures.
Supplementary to that, is there going to be some sort of time frame put in there? Because sometimes obviously things are investigated, but then how do you then have a measure for completing works and actually looking at a time frame for them?
We haven't thought about putting in a time frame. I guess we actually, from a reporting perspective, we report this within a financial year. So my understanding of how we would report on this is that if we have investigated it and that there are improvement measures that are planned in place, and then that would actually be a tick in the box in terms of that 100% compliance. So I don't think we would be actually marking ourselves down where we've actually done the investigation and programmed something, but not actually done the physical works yet.
Would someone like to move this report, please? Well, I'll move it, and we go from A through to L. Thank you. Right. Once again, thank you very much for this report. Very, very full report, and I congratulate you both on it. It's well done. Anyone? So, the seconder, would you like to speak? Thank you. Okay. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Oh, now, move on to, yes, that's right, so 438 to 447. Thank you. This is Greg and Kelly. Thank you.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on the 1st of June 2019 flood event. So as you will recall, this was a significant event that resulted in 7 houses, 6 garages being flooded, and we had about 40 other service requests related to flooding on private property. Of the 105 service requests that we received, 60 of those were classified as warranting further investigation type work. Of those 60 investigations, 21 of those have been addressed and completed. Further 22 have been assessed and either new upgrades identified or if they've been associated with existing upgrades we were already planning on doing. And then there are 17 that further investigation is still underway on. So 1.5 of the summary sets out the projects that we have where we are doing upgrading works. So a number of those will be familiar to you in terms of projects that we have underway that will be constructed either this financial year or next financial year. And 1.6 sets out the sites where we are doing further investigation work. Now those sites there are works. The further investigation is effectively where we're just going to do some more CCTV type inspection to confirm that our existing system is working as we expect it to be working. So we're just checking that there's no blockages we're not aware of. We're not expecting to find anything wrong, but it's just effectively a double check in some critical areas where we want to double check that the flooding that occurred was more related to the amount of rainfall that occurred rather than there being any inadequate infrastructure. So happy to take any questions. There was just one correction in the report to point out.
Okay, page 6, 4.9, change department to committee, where it says utilities and roading department.
Apologies for that.
Yes, Councillor Stewart.
I just wondered, is it possible within our present network, and I know you do have some alarms on some systems, and it comes back to a central control centre or whatever, how it works, but where there is flat valves that get stuck, in this age of digital systems, is it possible to identify before these upgrades where you have sensitive points, and like there's a couple of instances here where valves got stuck and flat valves. Is it possible for some gear to go on these areas where it will identify that it's stuck and you can address it?
We have done some work in that area. Over the past 12 months, we've actually moved to a more proactive maintenance. So we actually have them on a regular inspection schedule now. So there's a requirement, it's on an annual basis to go through and actually do a full condition assessment of the flap gate, including taking photographs of the status of the flap gate. So that occurs on an annual basis, so a full inspection to make sure it's functioning as intended. We also have a reactive type inspection that is undertaken. So that's when, as part of looking at the weather forecast in the next 3 to 5 days, if there is any significant rainfall that is predicted, we mobilise our maintenance crews to go out and check our pump stations, our grills, our critical sumps, and now also our flap gates to make sure that they aren't blocked in any way and that they are functioning as intended. So we don't have anything like an alarm or a sensor that actually detects whether it's working or not, but we have put in measures to make sure maintenance staff are checking the condition of the flap gates as part of those pre-event inspections.
Thank you. Two questions following that. One being, has this checking system developed to the level you've got it now, post June 1st, 2019? Like, you didn't have it in place, and because I'm particularly the flap gate that blocked on the Kaikanui and the flooding in Kiln Place in South Kaiapoi. I mean, that is a problematic area. Are you telling me that these systems are now in place since then? And the second one is, how costly would it be to put sensors on flap valves? Can you do that and monitor these really problematic areas
The driver for looking at this was probably actually more the July 2017 event that we had. And at that point, which wasn't as a significant storm event, but during that event, we actually had some issues with some flap gates that we didn't know we actually had. So back then, since then, we've actually done a detailed audit to actually make sure our asset records are up to date with what flap gates we actually have. The next step for that was developing a inspection form that now our water unit has for doing those annual inspections, and that's now linked in with the AMIS project that we have underway for doing more, rather than reactive type maintenance, proactive type maintenance. So it wasn't solely the 1st of June 2019 event that initiated this. It has been ongoing, related to other flood events, and it is part of our overall improvements to our asset data set and also our proactive maintenance programs for assets. In terms of the cost to go and put in such sensors, if it was at a site like a pump station site, so there was a flap gate at a pump station site where we have existing telemetry SCADA system, it's effectively, and we've got power to that site, it's effectively there, just the cost of actually putting in the sensor and connecting it into the existing SCADA system. So that would be relatively modest in terms of a sensor, maybe in the order of $1,000, I'm guessing. But it's the sites which, flap gates in the Kiln Place example, where we had a flap gate that didn't work, that's on William Street. We would have the challenges of either getting electricity or solar to that site, getting in a sensor, connecting it to either our SCADA system somehow, either via the cellular network or some other means. So that's where the costs would actually start to ramp up quite significantly in terms of having an effective, electronic sensor for the status of a flap gate. Not at the moment. I think if we were in the situation where we did have a flap gate that was so critical that we had to have that level of monitoring over, then we would definitely look at it. But because we actually have staff that are checking these flap gates prior to an event, and they are travelling around looking at pump stations during the event, we are in a position to respond pretty quickly to address anything that's not performing as intended. And it is a little bit, we do have a list of hotspots, so critical sumps that we know we've had problems with in the past, and if we know we've had issues with flap gates in the past, we'll definitely be checking those during events as well.
Obvious, then why wasn't this picked up if you were going round and looking at it on June the 1st, and it's clearly critical because it backed up right through all South Kaiapoi. But I won't ask that, will I?
I think it is a fair question to ask, and we certainly in the debrief during the event and during the debrief, we acknowledged that we had not picked that up as early as we could have during that event and responded as quickly as we could have. And we identified some breakdowns in our communication line between our road maintenance contractor and our own staff, and also the contractors we had. We've actually, so we've got the road maintenance contractors, our own staff, water unit staff, and we've also got a contractor who we use to do some live management of pumps, and that didn't work on the day. So I'd feel a lot more confident that now, taking the lessons from this event, we would have responded to that sooner. And I'm pretty sure we've acknowledged that at the time, and I'll still acknowledge that today. So it is a fair question to ask, and I don't think it would have made any difference in terms of the extent of flooding that occurred, but it would have made a difference in terms of the duration of flooding, because we actually went in and deployed pumps into Coombe Place to pump that area down, and we could have got those in earlier in that day to help in that area.
Councillor Redmond.
Thanks, Kelly. In 1.7, you refer to the Riverside Bowling Club, and in that was 1.6, and 1.7, it indicates that the work is predominantly to confirm the existing reticulation was in good condition and functioning as intended. The Riverside Bowling Club made a deputation to the Kaiapoi Tuahiwi Community Board about 12 months ago now. Their impression was that the water that backed up and flooded their greens was the result of the absence of a sort of non-return valve, and that the water was coming from the street or from somewhere else. I just wondered, have you investigated the cause of their problem and come up with a solution?
Yes, we have. So our project delivery unit have done a detailed investigation of the Riverside Bowling Club and had looked at a range of different issues and potential solutions there. We are currently engaging with the representative from the bowling club. One of the key things that they've identified is that in the plans for the stormwater drainage that was submitted to council as part of the building consent, they actually had a pump that was draining the artificial surface, the green. The site investigations identified that no pump has actually been installed at that site. And that's quite key for two reasons. One, the pump would obviously help with draining down the green itself, but also the discharge pipe is a smaller diameter pipe than the upstream pipes leading into the chamber, presumably because it's actually going to intended to operate under pressure. So we're currently working with the bowling club to determine why the pump was never installed. The reason that it's included under 1.6 is we're not expecting at this point in time that council, from a drainage perspective, is going to have to provide any funding for a solution there. The solution might actually be for the bowling club to put in the pump that was originally planned as part of the development.
Questions? Would someone like to move this recommendation, please? A, B, C and D. Thank you. Thank you. Yep, right. So it's Councillor. Right. Would you like to? Nothing to add? Would you like to? Thank you. Right. Well, I'll move it then. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you very much. And how's the tooth? Okay. Yeah. He looked a bit miserable. Right, we're going to move on now with portfolios. Road and Councillor Williams, please.
Yeah, well, I think most people sort of know what's happening on the roading scene. I'd like a word out there what's happening with the Southbrook Road. We've had a wee committee there investigating what we can. We had one roading teams come up with a proposal that it was basically unanimous for the team that Torless Street becomes a bit of a crossing there and some lights and some one-way areas round, and we actually think that will be the safest option for people crossing the road. It would save some congestion on that road, which was going to help a lot there. There's only a wee bit of money to go towards at this stage, so it's a long-term plan, so it's probably the council whether they want to stack up with a big budget on long-term plan to help Southbrook, or which is more important, the Skew Bridge or Southbrook. I don't know if we can have both, but this particular plan, was unanimous in our committee. We all thought the Torley Street was in actual fact myself, I was blown away from it because the staff had thought out of the square and have come up a real good solution with the school movement and car moving there, so it helps the cyclists, it helps the pedestrians there, it helps the traffic management around the whole area, so I think that will be a good thing to look forward to, but there's going to be some money involved to do it. That's the biggest problem, but that's all for now.
Stuart.
Thank you. Not much to report. Tomorrow I go with the Mayor to talk to ECAN about the Lineside drain or Boys drain, depending on what it's really called, who knows, which is the major drain which has a tide gate control and goes into the upper Kaiapoi, and it discharges literally tons of sediment coming off the lower Lineside Road paddocks on the north and south side of Lineside Road. It has been subject of complaint for the last 3 years to the Water Zone Committee, and there's been quite a lot of investigation on our part, and the drain that we're responsible for, this council is responsible for, has been cleaned, but it hasn't resolved the issue, and it has come down to a land management issue. Essentially, it has stock and cropping on an area of wetland, and ECAN probably needs to act on that. So, and between the two councils, come up with some sort of solution, because in fact what it does is negate the efforts that this council is doing on rehabilitation of the Kaiapoi River with this continual flow of sediment into, it goes into the tide gate is on just along from the start of the Passchendaele path. You pass it as you're going up to Rangiora. So that is an issue I hope that we come to some solution about. The other, on the stock water race issues, I just note that, and I've noted quite a bit, that there is planting, people are planting within very, very close to the stock water race, and the latest example that everyone can go past is Springbank Honey on the corner on Oxford and Garteries. They have planted natives hard up against the race, weed mat, mulch, and now they're putting a fence there. Any rain and the whole mulch is going to go straight into the race. My understanding was that the bylaw, and someone will need to refresh my mind about it, is that no planting within 10 metres of the race. Is that the case, Kelly? So what happens to the other side?
This road.
Oh, well, if you've got along, for instance, Oxford Road, if you've got it hard again in the road reserve or wherever that is on the property boundary, and and people are putting landscaping hard up against it. So what happens when you put mulch and it washes into the race? Anyway, there's more of that happening around the district than I think is probably desirable, and the type of plants that people are putting in, like calla lilies, and which just push, away they go. But yes, so I'm bringing that up as an issue I think needs to be addressed in some sort of fashion through, we've got a bylaw that needs to be, people need to be educated, or get a visit from somebody just to check out whether they're compliant. Thank you.
Councillor Williams again, utilities.
Yeah, I'll just inform everybody a wee bit about the, I think everybody's sort of in a wee bit of knowledge that we're looking at putting in solar power in the sewage complex in Rangiora, and Gavin's had a bit of a wee talk to us, and he's put that on hold a wee bit because of the Tiwai aluminium smelter. Power prices might drop, so that could considerably affect our proposal of doing that. So so that's been just, he's negotiating with Meridian, and so it's on a wee bit of a hold at the moment till we know what happens. With the water side, everybody knows Garrymere at long last is up and running, and running good, and everybody seems happy. And we've got another meeting with Points Road people tomorrow night, which is going to be a tricky meeting, but I think we've got staff and what we can handle that. I'd probably like to put at this point a pat on the back for a staff member, Colin Roxburgh, through this committee here, of the amount of work, time and good work he's been putting into all this type of scenario there. He's very conscientious, and he's doing a real good job in my books, and I don't praise many people, but for me to do it, it means he's doing a real good job, and hopefully I'd like the CEO to flick him an email to say thanks from this committee for the work he's putting in, because he is putting in a real good job. So, you know, it's thanks for me. That's all. Okay.
So as you're all aware, we had a Soil and Hazardous Waste Working Party meeting on the 8th of July. We've got issues with regard to recycling. A fair bit of the conversation was how we're going to deal with some of those issues. Obviously communication is going to be important, so we're looking at enhancing that. In Christchurch there are 4 people that audit their recycling bins in the city. We're hoping that we're going to be able to pull their expertise out here and come up with some sort of system, whether it's a star or a tick or whatever. I was talking to my parents on Sunday, and they were quite proud of the fact that they had got a tick on their recycling bin, so it seems to make some sort of difference having a tick or a star on a bin. So the 10th of August there's a joint landfill followed by a joint standing committee meeting in Christchurch. They'll be full on. Most of you saw Eugenie Sage's announcement with regard to the levy last week, but I will point out there is a little thing in that announcement which says current economic conditions will be considered before implementation timelines are confirmed later this year. So I've got no doubt there's going to be an increase in the levy, but how much and over what time frame as yet seems to me to be unknown, and I am aware of some emails going around on how we might potentially be spending it, yet it doesn't come into effect until next financial year, and as yet we don't know to what level it will come into effect. So Kitty's got a pretty hard road trying to anticipate a few of these things to put into our LTP when we go into the new year and start discussing it. So that's all from me, thank you.
Councillor Mayor. Councillor Mayor Dan.
Thank you. Yeah.
Apologise.
No, that's all right. I was a councillor before I was mayor, so there we are. Look, just transport update. Really had a really good meeting with the NZTA CEO last week while I was in Wellington. That's Nicole Rosie. Neville was joined me up at Rural and Provincial, so he came along to the meeting as well. And Jim Harland zoomed into that discussion. So I raised with her principally concerns around the Woodian Safety Improvements Program. Certainly the bypass was on the discussion, but we know where that's at the present time. But the safety improvements were the principal discussion point there. She took on board our frustrations on the delay in that project and the lack of communication, clear communication with the community around raising their expectations out in the public arena and then leaving it for a good year before there's been any communication. We got this. It was following the meeting with the Transport Minister. Not long after that, we got an indication of the signalisation of the crossing and through Wood End. So that's likely to be October with the construction season. But it is did raise still around the funding of that. Raised the concern around the fact that, albeit that they're going to go out and do some work now, they've indicated. I forget the staff member from NZTA's name that was here the other day. That he's going to be leading that exercise more. I said that we do want the Community Board and Council briefed on that before we go to the community. I think we need to make sure we're aligned in that space and well briefed, so she took that on board. I also raised the cases where we're not getting the funding through, where of importance to us, Skew Bridge, all those other matters, and she did indicate to me that perhaps we might want to consider a lot more lobbying of the Provincial Growth Fund. Apparently councils that have been a bit more active in the space of lobbying in the provincial growth space have had some good results, and she cited Queenstown, so it's on my list to reach out to the Minister's office to find out who we need to talk to get in the right ear. Look, it's worth a go. They can but say no. Also I raised around the Tuahiwi speed limits and the absurdness of that process that we've been through, and the threat by one of their staff of legal action I just thought was appalling. Jim Harland is going to follow that through, and also I'm going to look at having a more regular meeting with Jim Harland, who's the Regional Relationships Manager here, because these projects of ours, we do need to keep an eye on them and make sure that we've got lines of communication. Our staff certainly do, but at elected level, I see Jim at Greater Christchurch, but that's with a different role. This is important to our district, so agreed that that'll be a way forward. Nicole, I was certainly encouraged by her. She's quite forthright, and I think she'll be a breath of fresh air for NZTA. She certainly took on board that they're not particularly good in the space of communication and can certainly do better. So she said, watch me with the performance that we do in this space. So I've given her 12 months. Well, she said, give me 12 months, and I agreed on that, but I said, the reality is, though, I do want to see some action in the spaces that we've talked about. So it was a good discussion, and we had a good hearing. So that's all we can ask for.
Yes, you can ask a question.
Just wondering whether it's worthwhile reinforcing to Land Transport, and they will know that there's been another 2 major accidents on that road in the last week or so, and what the safety side of it's looking at for that bypass. Just they will know, but just another reinforcing that. For the Wood End bypass, because there's been 2, I think, in the last week. So that's another nail we need to nail home, that we're not happy with the safety aspect.
and certainly in terms of safety, that's our priority. Yeah, bypassed, absolutely, but the reality is, and unless there's a significant change in government policy, and it gets on the priority list, it's not likely to happen. And I'm being real about that. But we mustn't give up on that either. So and continue to advocate for it. But I'm being fairly real. The ones that I personally, and I think we need to be focused on, is getting those safety improvements in the interim. The two major things, I think, are the safety improvements there. I'd put Skew Bridge on that list and a solution of some kind. We mustn't forget about Southbrook. They're the three major areas that we really do need to, if we're targeting where it should be there in those areas. We've got lots of other priorities, but they're ones that I think we're just going to need to pick a few and work on those and keep banging the drum on that in that respect. Yes, well, we will. Well, I've noted it as well, but we'll see. Well, anyway, I don't want to comment on politics here.
So, sorry, just another wee question there, please. Through the road safety, can we push hard through that as well?
Many angles as we can,
Yeah,
Councillor Doody. That doesn't hurt, so please assist through that as well.
Will do.
All the forums that we can raise the topics of our priorities, the better.
Thank you.